Mabiyayang araw sa bawat isa. Nais kong isagawa ngayon yung huling bahagi ng aking mga lecture video ukol sa balanced spirituality. So, babalik ako sa aking PowerPoint. Sige. So, balikan natin. Ito yung ating balangkas. Yung sa pangalawang bahagi, dito tayo nagtapos sa pagtalakay sa political conversion. Pero hindi pa tayo tapos dito, kaya balikan natin ito. So, ilalagay ko lang yung pamagat. Kung maalala ninyo, parang sabi natin, pag-uusapan natin yung political conversion, tutuon tayo dun sa artikulo ni McFerry, yung Sin and Conversion. At doon, nandun yung balangkas ni McFerry, may pagbabago ng paa, ng ulo, ng isip, at ng puso. Yan. At ang ginawa ko, sabi ko gusto kong balikan yung group discussion exercise natin kung saan pinag-usapan ang points of agreement tsaka points of disagreement. Doon sa pangalawang video ko, natapos na natin yung points of disagreement. So, yung konteksto nito, di ba sabi ko, kung may isang artikulo na gusto kong isulat uli, kasi para sa akin, malaking tulong yung balangkas niya. Pero may paraan na mas mapabuti pa yung paglalahad ng balangkas na yon. Ito yung artikulong yun. I talked about how there's a need to nuance the article. Kasi I talked about the problem of the one-sided black and white argumentation. I had a rather extended discussion on the need to nuance the reality of social sin and the fact that the call to conversion to justice does not mean, some sort of total repudiation of our position in the system, that sort of thing. In fact, it would mean us being part of the system, but hopefully really being inspired to transform it in some manner. Okay, so I also began actually points of agreement in the last video I made, and I brought in how some of you like this notion of conversion. It's not a one-time, big-time thing. It's a continuous, lifelong process. And I said McVery's version of that is this frame for conversion to justice, right? Which has this cycle of conversion of the feet, conversion of the head, and conversion of the heart. And if you recall from the last video, I emphasized how conversion of the feet is the moment that drives the whole conversion process, right? So yung the element from McVery's article that I give emphasis to here is really that call to dialogue of life. The context here is really the call to reach out in some manner to those at the margins, right? And to have some sort of direct personal connectedness with them. So the whole aspect of human encounter with these situations. And sabi ko, it's all about changing the human context of our lives. Para lawakan natin yung ating mundo. Diba? Subukan natin mas maging malay doon sa sitwasyon sa buhay ng mga taong nasa laylayan sa isang tuwirang paraan para mas madama din natin, mas maunawaan natin yung kanilang kalagayan. Yun. Tapos sabi natin, di ba, ito ay hindi isang ikot lang gagawin, isang beses lang gagawin. Panghabang buhay na proseso ito. In fact, I was thinking since that second video I finished, actually, the situation is in our class, a lot of us, unfortunately, were not able to participate in the immersion program of the course. And nakakalungkot, no? Kasi sa totoo lang, marami sa sinasabi natin sa kurso, particular, no, itong talakayan ukol sa conversion to justice, mas naiintindihan, no, mas nagkakaroon ng kahulugan. Sana, no, kung tayo ay dumaan sa immersion program. And I think those of you who fortunately were able to do the immersion activity, no, before the crisis, I'm thinking in particular of those of you who are my DS students. No? I think you will confirm this, no? How the immersion program, and I think everyone can also look back at your previous immersion experiences, no? In the Loyola schools, in the Binhi program and the JEEP program, perhaps, NSTP, and even your immersion programs in high school. How they can be a source of true learning and true insight. And yan, lahat ng iyan, ito yung tawag, no, para sa conversion of the faith. If I may just extend this reflection a little bit more, what does conversion, let me bring in this discussion, what does conversion of the faith mean in terms of our crisis today? To my mind, very clearly, no? As a first best option, conversion of the faith would mean that in some way, we endeavor to, in fact, volunteer, no? To sort of directly help out today, no? In terms of working, for example, in some manner, no? In the hospitals. And I want to emphasize here, it's not that we want to get sick, and we protect ourselves properly, but in other words, to help out in some direct manner, in perhaps even in the hospitals or in the communities, in the programs now to feed those who have lost their livelihoods. So that's the first best option, but of course, right, that's not an option that's available to most all of us because of safety concerns, and even for those perhaps who are willing to take certain reasonable risks. In other words, you're not being reckless, but even if you want to take some reasonable risks, you don't also want to get in the way, with those who understand more what needs to be done. In other words, the doctors and the nurses in the hospitals, and the local government officials, in our barangays. So anyway, what I just like to propose that as a second best option, in terms of practicing, some sort of form of conversion of faith, ito yung tipong binanggit ko na ito, sa huling video. Parang makialam tayo, alamin natin kung ano yung nangyayari. Huwag lang tayo magkulong sa ating mga bahay, yung ganong tipo. Manood tayo ng balita. At siguro ang magiging bunga nito, subukan natin tumulong kahit sa isang simpleng paraan. I guess this is why also in my previous messages, I would mention how, the Ateneo is trying to, in some manner, reach out to our frontline health workers and our those people in the communities who have lost their incomes and are going hungry. So, yun ang punto nito, para subukan nating lawakan yung buhay natin, makialam tayo, and once again, perhaps when the situation normalizes more, moving forward, sabi ko, it has to be a lifelong process, this constant recourse to some form of, immersion, Ewan ko, yung parang gumawa tayo ng paraan, na makiugnay tayo sa isang tuwirang paraan sa mga taong nasa laylayan ng lipunan. Okay, tutuloy ako. Let's move now to the second major agreement. So here I'm trying to express, how I agree with some of the central arguments, of the article. And I want to bring up now how McVeary will speak of how a key element of conversion of the head is some sort of critical awareness, of societal processes, including the reality of social sin. All right. So once again, I bring in how we have approached this reality, in our discussions thus far in class. Social sin are these structures, institutions that in some degree, in some manner, they perpetuate poverty, and inequality. They favor some social groups at the expense of others. And I recall now how many of you picked up and agreed with this argument, from the article. And McVery, of course, is very emphatic about this inconvenient truth, right? And I quote a statement here of McVery, uh, such is the consequence of the accumulated decisions of good people like ourselves. We are involved. Parang sinasabi ni McVery, parang hindi natin maikakaila. Bahagi tayo ng realidad na ito. Bahagi tayo ng problemang ito, na may di pagkapantay-pantay sa lipunan. Okay. Now, if you recall, in some of the points of disagreement, I tried to also nuance how we are culpable, all right? But now, I'd like to emphasize some points, and I'll in a while, I'll bring in Pope John Paul II, who was the Pope before Francis now and Benedict, where he emphasized, let me put in this statement, sabi ni Pope John Paul II kasi I think this was, if I recall correctly, an encyclical he wrote sometime in 1987. He said, social sin is the result of the accumulation of many personal sins. All right, and this next note I put here, I emphasize, I try to say that what Pope John Paul II is saying here, diba, is that if there is this reality of social sin, it does not, as it were, appear by magic, or occur by magic. Okay? Merong pinagmumulan ito. Ang pinagmumulan nito, yung mga personal na kasalanan, the moral failings of people who create these structures, who expand them and allow them to perpetuate themselves when they in fact can do something to transform them. All right, and dito I say, okay, we can. So here, what we are saying is we try to qualify. All right, we have to qualify culpability. At certain points, we do not know. All right, that we are part of the harmful effects of these structures, or even if we do know, we do not intend harm that they inflict on people. We talked in the previous video about sweatshops, etc. And we buy a product, we don't wish those sweatshops, all right? Pero ito, what's being emphasized here is we can still be morally culpable in terms of sins of omission. So parang sinasabi kasi dito, we're not culpable in terms of actively creating these structures. We are not, hindi tayo yung gahama na negosyante na nagsasamantala sa mga manggagawa. Pero, okay, sabi natin, sa puntong bumili tayo ng produkto ng negosyong iyan. At yung tipong alam natin, ito yung nangyayari. At tapos, parang wala tayong pakialam. Yung parang masyado rin tayong kulong sa ating sariling buhay. Alam natin yung problema. At, meron tayong magagawa. So here I'm talking about, it's not that you have to be like Ninoy Aquino. I've said this in class and give up your life on the tarmac. Hindi. But at certain points, you can do something to address the evil that is being done. At dahil parang masyado namang hassle, yung tipo nga masyado kang kulong sa sarili mong mga inaalala, masyado makitid yung buhay mo. Wala kang ginagawa. Yeah. This is sin of omission. As a last point, and this is not anymore in that page 5 of handout 6 that I gave, I'd like to add this point. There is this moral theologian, or Miss Minati, in an article, he argues, in fact, that we have to talk about social sin not in terms of moral guilt, All right? Kasi moral guilt, in my understanding, in traditional moral theology, you're morally guilty only if you have knowledge, alam mo, and you have intention. You sort of, in some manner, intend the harm that is being done. Hormis Minati says, in many cases, in our involvement in social sin, we do not have full knowledge. No? Even if we know sometimes, because of the very operation of structures, no, we sort of, this is the effect of structures. This is the way things are done. And so we sort of somehow tell ourselves, wala, talagang ganyan yung buhay. Di ba? Parang ganon. So, there's no full knowledge. And certainly, in many cases, there is no intention. No? Hindi natin gusto yung pinsala na ginagawa nitong mga balangkas na ito. So yung tatay, 'di ba, sabi ko, yung tunay niyang hangarin doon sa halimbawa ko, no, yung tuparin yung pangako sa anak at gusto niya kasi maging mas mahusay pa, no, sa basketball yung anak niya kasi meron naman talagang husay sa basketball. Yun ang hangarin niya, hindi yung magsamantala ng mga manggagawa. All right. So Hormis Minati says, we have to tell people that they are morally responsible, even when there is not full knowledge or no full consent. No? And he uses the word moral accountability. So that is the where that statement I put in the slide comes from. We may not be morally guilty, right? Because of lack of sinful intention, and maybe to make that phrase more complete, because of lack of full knowledge, lack of direct knowledge of the harm being done. But someone like Hormis Minati will argue we are still morally accountable, and that moral responsibility includes, the obligation to reduce or mitigate in some manner the harmful effects of that structure that we participate in, and to transform them through time. If we had more classes, I would have brought in another example of participation in social sin. I would have talked of an Atenean who joins a business organization perhaps, and, ito, pamilyadong tao, no? Parang, so I'm bringing this example, but very quickly. He has 3 children, let us say, and ito, siya yung naghahanap buhay para sa pamilya kasi yung isang asawa nasa bahay, di ba? Nag-aalaga ng mga anak, malilit pa yung mga anak. Tapos yun, parang naging problema niya. Pagkatapos niyang pumasok sa negosyong iyon, nalaman niya, meron palang makatiwali ang ginagawa, yung negosyo. Diba? Let's say again, let's talk about parang yung mga benepisyong kailangan ibigay sana sa mga manggagawa, pinagkakait sa kanila. So it's like an open discussion that I would do in the final oral exam. Tipong, okay, so how would you sort of, if this person comes to you, kapwa Atenista, Atene alumni, and asks you, what to do, no? Parang dilemma, parang I have to. Let's say also, in my example, I say the job market is tight, all right? So, and then because he's just, let's say, middle management, or he's a new hire. If he tries to, go against what's happening, he will just lose his job. No, he knows yung tipong ganun. So the person is caught in a dilemma, di ba? Parang, there's a real harm that's being done to people in the company, but parang there's that need to provide for his family. Okay, so of course there's not just one response to that situation, but what I try, one of the things I try to bring out in that example is perhaps in the short term, the options of the person are limited, right? That person cannot just lose the job. Perhaps, let's say no savings. Let's say that person was a scholar in the Ateneo, so hindi ito yung tipong merong parents foundation at may savings. So talagang maghihirap na yung pamilya niya. So in the short term, ipit siya, di ba? But through time, his options, his alternatives increase. right? So there's that option of working in the company to try to transform, of course, that injustice there. Or there is, of course, the option to leave that company. Ibunyag pa yan sa media, yung ganun tipo. Di ba? Pag may ibang option na. Yan. Pero ang punto dito, no, parang one of the points I tried to bring out is that this problem of sin of omission, no, parang wala kang ginagawa. Di ba? Para, uli, no, hindi ko sinasabi dito magpakamatay ka. Di ba? Pero at certain points, there's some concrete action that you can do to mitigate the evil and to sort of transform the situation through time. Pero yun, hindi mo ginagawa. Bahagi tayo, no, ng katiwaliang nangyayari. Okay, let me continue now, guys. No? So, you know, the next discussion that I think is very valuable is when McVeary talks about unexamined ideological presuppositions. And medyo mahaba, no, yung unexamined ideological presuppositions. So let me just shorten it. Let me just refer to it as UIP, no, unexamined ideological presuppositions. So in general, no, what are UIPs? I asked this question of you in the discussion exercise. In general, in my slide, I put these are context-bound assumptions about how the world works, ground our worldview. Right, which I argue here is biased because of those assumptions. And let me bring in at this point, diba, that whole, I asked you in your discussion exercise, what are the UIPs you have with regard to the problem of poverty in the Philippines? And I think I mentioned this already in the last video. No? Parang the most prevalent UIP, no, across all the groups was yung tipong yung pananaw na ang mahirap ay mahirap dahil ito'y kasalanan nila, no? Parang dahil sila ay tamad. No? Kulang sa pagsikap yung ganun tipo. Alright? And, you know, if we had a class, I would, of course, bring out this discussion and say, anong tingin nyo dyan? Mahirap ay mahirap dahil sila ay tamad. Parang yun ba ay totoo? Yun ba ay hindi totoo? O yun ba ay may bahaging totoo, bahaging hindi totoo? Yung ganun. And invariably, okay, of course, people will say, sir, parang may naman, no? Parang, and I would agree. There's a part that's true, perhaps there. Pero most people would say, sir, hindi naman pwedeng lahat-lahatin. Di ba? Yung problema if you generalize. And then, of course, you know, people at some point would say, sir, of course, there are other factors, no, that cause poverty, that sort of thing, right? And you know, I would of course affirm these points of view. And let me put my next point in the slide. No? The UIPs, ang tawag ko sa kanila, kalahating katotohanan. No? They are half truths. Right? And in fact, that is why perhaps they are more dangerous. No? Parang they're not completely false. You know, I would not banish them as completely false. Right? So yung tipong ang mahirap ay, you know, parang yung pananaw na kulang ng pagsikap. Ako, sa aking pagdalaw sa mga komunidad, kuminsan nakikita ko ito sa isang banda, yung tipong kuminsan kulang ng pagkusa. No? Parang kulang din ng, parang kuminsan may kultura din ng umaasa na lang sa tulong, no, yung gano'n. Okay, pero okay, half truth, no. Malayo 'yan, no, sa buong katotohanan, no. Parang halimbawa sasabihin yung extreme case, no. And dito kasi I put half truth based on a limited experience of reality, di ba? And then siguro an extreme case of this would be, you know, if there some person came up to me and said, alam mo, kaya ako, o isang estudyante, Jim, alam mo, kaya ako naniniwala, di ba, na mahirap ay mahirap dahil sila ay tamad. Kasi, meron akong mamang nakikita dyan, no, sa daan. Dumadaan ako araw-araw at nakikita ko, so nagpapalimos siya, pero malusog naman yung katawan niya. No? Yan. Ako, simple lang yung sasagutin ko sa tao. Yan. Parang kung yung konsepto mo, no, yung pag-unawa mo sa realidad, ng taong mahirap ay nauwi lamang, no, sa taong iyon, sobrang makitid. No? you have forgotten of the whole reality of the laboring poor. Parang, ito yung mga kababayan natin, no? Hindi sila tamad, no? Ito yung kumakayod araw, gabi. Pero kahit anong gawin nila, no? Yung tipong hindi makaahon. So this is the reality of the laboring poor, right? Yeah. And when some students say there are other factors, of course, I would affirm that. No? You can speak of how poverty is intergenerational. Yung mga anak sa mahirap na pamilya, sa halip na mag-aral, di ba? Tumutulong sa paghanap buhay, lumalaki sa lansangan. You can speak of our educational system, no, in that it does not prepare our youth, no, give them the skills to um, to move out of poverty. Of course, you can bring in the whole problem of rural producers because they do not own the land, laborers. No? Hindi sila yung may-ari ng lupa. Katiting. Low wages, of course, nandyan yan. No? How rural producers get such low prices, no, for the products that they bring to the market, etc. So all of these, no, these are the other factors that have to be taken. You have to take account of them. No? So masyado makitid. Let me just add with this, and here we are saying, we're not saying that work ethic is not important. Work ethic is important, all right? But, the common argument is, let me put it in words now in the slide, a lack of the work ethic, and let me put in vices because I'll bring an example in a while. Umiinom, di ba? Yan. Aba, sasabihin ng argumento, yan ang dahilan kung bakit merong yung mga tao naghihirap. Di ba? At uli, sa isang banda, totoo yan. No? Pero ito, let me bring in, a discussion I used to have with my mother. And of course, I'd like to make it clear, guys, I love my mother, bless my mama. But I got into an argument with her once kasi, may isang nagmamaneo sa amin nung araw. At napansin ng nanay ko, no, na tuwing linggo ay iinom. At hindi ito inom. Ha? Ito yung inom. Ibig sabihin, mula umaga yan, no, hanggang gabi, linggo, umiinom. At syempre, sasabihin ng nanay ko, ano ba naman yan? Di ba? Parang, you of course try to treat our house companions properly. Pero give them good wages. But parang napupunta sa pag-inom. Of course, I had to discuss this with my mom, and I had to tell her of my experience when I was a novice with the Jesuits. No? And I think I mentioned this in class. Sa tuwing linggo kasi pupunta kami sa Sapampalay, no, which is a resettlement area. Tumutulong kami sa simbahan. At doon, yung isang malinaw na mapapansin mo if you work with the church, no, there in Sapampalay, ay ito, no, ang karamihan na kumikilos para sa simbahan, yung mga kababaihan, yung mga manang. Okay? Bakit ka mo, no? At least nung panahong naroon ako, kasi yung mga kalalakihan, okay, meron silang ibang spirits tuwing linggo. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin niya, no? Umiinom sila tuwing linggo. Yan. And ako, as a novice, no, you are encouraged to integrate with the people. At syempre, ako sumama ako minsan. I would join, these drinking sessions, etc. At ito yung nalaman ko, no? Okay? Ang nangyari kasi, itong mga taong ito, di ba, walang trabaho sa Sapampalay. Okay? So ito, lumuluwas sila halimbawa sa Maynila. No? Doon nagtatrabaho sa construction. At doon sila, 5-6 na araw, tapos uwi lang yan. No? Sabado halimbawa sa Sapampalay. Yan. At yung karanasan nila, yung tipong trabaho lang sila ng trabaho, construction. Pero yung tipong gano'n, yung tipong yung taong nasa tubig, tapos yung bibig lang yung nakalabas. That reality of just getting by. No? And in that context, no, you understand why they drink. Ito yung paraan ng pagtakas. Trying to escape a reality where you work and then parang halos hindi ka nakakaahon. Yung ganun. So what I'm saying here actually, guys, is this, and I tried to, of course, talk with my mom about this, is you tell me, okay, going back to the diagram in the slide, lack of work ethic, drinking leads to poverty. Sabi ko, pwede kong baliktarin yan eh. Poverty in terms of low wages, for example, dun sa halimbawa ko, tapos malayo pa sa pamilya, lack of education, I mentioned this earlier, lack of access, ownership of resources, general lack of opportunities. That can lead to lack of work ethic. So notice, no? Binaliktad ko yung causation. Binaliktad ko. And perhaps, no, in many cases, right, it's circular, you might say. Paikot yung problema. And ito, no, this of course is a more nuanced understanding of the relationship of work ethic with poverty, right? Now, why does the simple, this notion of ang hirap ay mahirap dahil sila ay tamad, why does that persist? Let me bring in a point of McVery now, no, in the article, di ba? He argues actually in so many words that UIPs are self-serving. Parang ginagawa ng UIP kasi, sinasabi niya, yung problema nasa ibang tao. Kung sila ay mahirap, kulang yung pagsikap ng mayan. And so yun, parang trying to move away, I put here insulating us from responsibility, and the context here is our attachment to our lives of comfort, etc. Right? And we put the blame on others, right? Instead of, in some manner, perhaps challenging ourselves, to try to understand better how we are part of the problem. All right? And I also like, of course, the way McVery will say, these UIPs, they are reinforced by our isolation, which he considers to be the second primary obstacle to the conversion of the first one, of course, are these UIPs themselves. All right. Okay, tutuloy ako medyo mahaba ulit ito. Let me just move on to the last point now, points of agreement. I like the way McVery frames conversion of the heart. And in the second point I have here, I just say, this conversion of the heart, of course, is the same thing, you might say, as living out that option for the poor, which we discussed many classes ago, right? So framing McVery, which I like, he talks first of a personal level of conversion. In general, the way I would translate it, this is about, I put here, witnessing to lifestyles and communities of solidarity. We, as individuals, perhaps, or with the families we make certain decisions not to live in a particular manner, right? So to do a particular kind of work, for example, that perhaps may pay less than a higher paying option. And in general, what these decisions do is parang sa isang banda, dahil sinusubukan nating tumulong, makiisa ng konti doon sa problema ng ibang tao, parang nagpapahirap tayo ng sarili natin. And ang punto dito kasi, parang hindi naman nagbabago yung mas pangkalahatang kalagayan ng lipunan. So anyway, in the reflection I'd like to give here is, it's like nagpahirap lang tayo ng ating sarili. Yung ganun. Okay? So that's the first level, all right? And then the second level, McVery will talk about this as a political response. And my take on that is, this is now more focused, proactive work for justice. And in a sense, this is when personal responses come together, and create social and political movements for reform in society. Okay, now I like the way this frame will emphasize, at least this is my take, But before you can move to that political response, no, the more broad movements for reform in society, it begins with those personal responses. You have to have some people who will say, okay, kasi kung minsan, no, sasabihin sa akin ng mga estudyante, sir, di ba, parang if you can show me in some manner, no, parang, these are not exactly the words they'd use, but this is sort of the argument na they would seem to say that, you know, I will sort of make certain decisions to help out if you can show me that it's reasonable to do so in terms of magbubunga naman ito ng pagbabago. Di ba? Ewan ko, no, kung minsan iniisip ko yung ganong klaseng argumento na parang if people need to be convinced that their efforts will not be wasted, parang ganon, di ba? Tingin ko, walang kikilos di ba? To my mind, you have to have people who will tell themselves, you know, even if things do not really change, you know, I am making some sort of commitment, no, to be in solidarity with my neighbor, you know, in terms of the kind of lifestyle I lead, in terms of the kind of work I do. Kahit hindi magbago na yung sitwasyon. Parang ito yung tawag, no, ng pagiging tao, pagiging Kristiyano. And certainly, no, you know, by the way, no, let me mention that some of you disagreed with McVery because you seem to understand that McVery was saying that the personal response, because it was just symbolic, was not important. But read the article more carefully. No? McVery, in fact, argues that the personal response, no, is the beginning of it all. Doon nagsisimula. Right? So it's like that analogy of the little candles. Now everyone lights a little candle. And then in time, now these little candles will come together, right? To bring far-reaching light, no, to the situation. And so that is how the personal responses of people, you know, this is of course the point of view of faith, no, will lead to, you know, this more expansive transformation of society with time. Okay? So, kailangan ng pasensya, no? Kailangan ng kakayang magsakripisyo. Pangmatagalang laban ito yung ganun tipo. Okay, I am done. No? I think this is the last slide, no, in terms of the conversion to justice frame. So let's go back to our outline. Tapos na ako. I've focused on religious conversion, political conversion. I actually can have a set of slides also for the moral conversion. But okay, I think I'd like to just let you reflect on that on your own, because I think that is closer to, of course, to the experience of everyone. But let me just mention here some of the things I emphasize in some manner, no, in terms of moral conversion in my handout 6. I mentioned there what is moral conversion. It is really that call to fundamental other-centeredness in our human relationships. You know, we don't get caught up with our insecurities. We're able to really reach out to people, listen to other people, you know, to connect with other people, etc. And I also mentioned here, of course, it's about faithfulness to personal relationships. So, you know, moral conversion begins with our significant others. And I always like to say significant others. These are the people, you know, who love us the most, and we love the most, but can also hurt us the most. And so part of moral conversion is really, I put in the notes, the capacity for reconciliation, for forgiveness and reconciliation in our deepest friendships and relationships. Okay, and then I put here returning to essentials, no, and basics of living a meaningful and happy human life. So parang I sort of talk about here how let's go back to being present to one another, di ba? In our homes, being present to one another, also in school, perhaps, and in spite of the many challenges of keeping up with the workload, etc. We get our priorities right, no, in terms of being present to each other. And the last point I put here is really the vocation of marriage, di ba? And the vocation of family. I write these words, providing for the nurturing environment that each person needs to grow up as a child, uh, so as to enhance our capacity, to grow in receiving and giving love. Okay, hindi ko nahahabaan, no? Let me move on and let me just say, okay, so I leave it up to you to reflect on that on your own, perhaps. I'd like to talk now about the interrelatedness of the three dimensions. And for this, if you recall, I gave you this quotation, which I sort of was part of your group discussion exercise. No? It's a statement where I say, for the Christian living in the midst of our social context today, the depth and authenticity of any one of the conversions of a balanced spirituality involving religious, moral, and political conversion, respectively. So the depth and authenticity of one, religious, moral, or political, okay, depends on the depth and authenticity of the other two. Okay, and then I asked you if you recall, do you agree or disagree with that statement? Okay, and then why? So, if we did not have this crisis, I would have engaged a number of you in a conversation with regard to this, in the midterm oral exam. Diba? And the way I would approach this statement, parang, okay, let me move to my next slide. Okay, you have light the three candles, right? The tabernacle candle, the birthday party candle, and the candle of solidarity. And that statement can be sort of rephrased in a question. All right, and the question would be this. No? The question would be, well, a number of questions, and this is the first one. The question is it possible to have someone with very deep and mature religious conversion while having at the same time very shallow and absent and absent moral and political conversion, respectively? Okay? So parang sinasabi, okay, posible ba na meron ka isang tao sobrang lalim, no, ng kanyang religious conversion? Ito yung taong let's say, let's use Christian religious conversion. Nagdadasal, di ba? Parang daman niya ang Diyos sa kanyang buhay, sa commitment to Jesus. Pero kasabay nun, di ba? Mababaw yung kanyang moral conversion. And, the example I usually use is, halimbawa, ito isang magulang. Wala siyang pakialam sa sarili niyang anak. Okay, so yan, tinanggal ko na yung moral conversion. Yung tipo, hindi niya mahal sarili niyang anak. At mababaw din yung political conversion. So, I've spoken how political conversion ends with option for the poor. Yan. So, ito yung taong nagsasabi, aba, yung mga mahirap na yan. Hindi ko problema yan. Problema nila yan. Posible ba yan? Now, if you say that's possible, you actually disagree with the statement I gave. But if you insist na this is not possible, that someone with religious conversion will have moral conversion and political conversion necessarily, then you agree with the statement. I can sort of speak of that statement in another way by, let us now focus on political conversion. Posible ba? This is my next question I have. It's possible to have someone with very deep political conversion. So let us say this is a person very active in programs for the poor. No? Sobrang maalab na yung pagnanasa niyang tulungan ng mga taong nasa laylayan. Pero kasabay nito, sabihin natin, parang ito yung magulang, hindi niya mahal yung sarili niya, yung ganun tipo. At here, let us use the more general understanding of religious conversion. This is a person not in touch with deeper, truer self. So once again, I ask, is that possible? And once again, I'm saying, if you say it is, then you disagree, no, with that statement that I had. But if you say, a certain depth of political conversion requires an equal depth, of moral and religious conversion, then you agree. Right? There's of course that last question, but let me skip it now kasi mahaba na ito. You can do the same thing with moral conversion in ganun tipo. But I think you get the drift. Right? In some manner, we are asking here, are the three conversions connected in some manner? Or can they you can have one that's very deep and while the other two are shallow or absent. Now, I will not answer that question, right? I will invite each of you to reflect on it, and maybe if there's some opportunity to discuss it with one another, all right? I would be, of course, be interested if we had some. I usually say this, no? If we had no crisis, I would say I would be interested if we talked about this in our oral exam. I'd be interested in your thoughts about it. So for those of you who are have expressed that you want to have a letter grade, this is possibly one of the things I'd like for you to talk about in the video that you will submit. Okay, let me end now, guys, with two things. One of the things I'd like to end with is this was given to me by Dr. Bob Guevaran, the Dr. Bob Guevaran. Ewan ko, humingi ako sa kanya ng, Bob, sige nga, pahinga naman. Pwede kong gamitin sa mga panalangin. Yeah, and this is one of the things that Bob gave me. Right? And this is from a book, as far as I understand, Justice and Jesuit Higher Education. That is the title of the book. And here it talks about how, let me read the line here that says, educators in Jesuit higher education should help students not only with their careers, right? And of course, the Ateneo wants to prepare you to be competent professionals in the careers that you are choosing or will choose, right? But not only that, education must also help them to discover their vocations, right? So the language of vocation, which I think each of us know comes from vocare, call. It's God's calling for us, right? So I'd like to end with this this reflection from this book, because of course when we talk about the balanced spirituality or liberation spirituality, this is of course related to each of us finding our vocations, right? And dito there are two people mentioned in this reflection. The first one is this man. I hope I pronounce his name a little bit properly, Dag Hammarskjöld. So he's a Swedish, as far as I recall, a Swedish economist and statesperson who became the second Secretary General of the United Nations. Right? And he has a line here where he says, he's talking about this deeper human calling to spend ourselves in love, right? And he says here, I do not know who or what put the question, but at some point I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful, etc. I will read that line in a while again. The other person that is mentioned here is this woman named Ita Ford. Itong si Ita Ford, unfortunately, she died as a martyr in El Salvador. Right? So this is the same setting, as the same country as Bishop Romero. We watched a video on Bishop Romero, and it was the same climate of repression. And she gave up her own life for this. And in this piece, of course, it it, uh, it mentions that unfortunate death, but what is emphasized really is how Ita Ford talks to a niece of hers about finding meaning in her life. All right. Anyway, basahin ko yung buong CP ngayon. So, besides helping students with their careers, educators in a school like the Ateneo must help them discover their vocations. That vocation might be to help raise kids, to discover galaxies, to drive a truck, or a combination of these. Whatever it is concretely, faith and reason point to a deeper human calling that we all share, namely to spend ourselves in love. People actually hear this call in daily life in the form of consolation, of enthusiasm for service. Former UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld wrote, I do not know who or what put the question, but at some point I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful and that therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal. Vocations are called forth from us, especially by role models and mentors, but also by poor and suffering people who show us how much we are needed. A few months before she was killed in El Salvador, 40 years ago, Marinol's sister Ita Ford wrote to her young niece, Jennifer, back in Brooklyn, I hope you come to find that which gives life a deep meaning for you. Something worth living for, maybe even worth dying for. Something that energizes you, enthuses you, enables you to keep moving ahead. I can't tell you what that might be. That's for you to find, to choose, to love. Ita invited Jennifer to discover her deepest calling, to find herself by losing herself. Higher education in a school like the Ateneo should awaken not only the dramatist or the chemist in students, but also that deepest vocation which Saint Ignatius recognized as the call of Jesus. Okay, let's end with this prayer, guys. The Serenity Prayer. As far as I understand, it is attributed to this American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, if that something like that pronunciation of the name once again. Pero sige, magtapos tayo. No? Itong dasal na ito, angkop ito no, para sa ating panahon. Let's take a moment of silence now, offering a prayer for one another, offering a prayer for, once again, in a special way, for our frontline health workers, all the people in our communities who have lost their livelihoods and incomes, and go hungry, even as we do this video. Sige, sa ngalan ng Ama, Anak, Espiritu Santo, Amen. So sa English yung ating panalangin, no? It says, this is our prayer now, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as He did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that He will make all things right if I surrender to His will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with Him forever in the next. Amen. Luwalhati sa Ama at sa Anak at sa Espiritu Santo, para nung sa una, gayon din ngayon, magpakailanman, magpasawalang hanggan. Amen. Sa ngalan ng Ama, Anak, Espiritu Santo. Amen.